Today, I'll tell you the story of a young English woman who crossed an ocean only to find her destiny waiting in the wild heart of America. Willa Hart, just 19, left behind the fog and cobblestone streets of London for a land where survival demanded courage and where an Apache warrior named Kael Redhawk would change her life forever. Their wedding night wasn't an ending. It was only the beginning of a love that would test every boundary and ignite something untamed between two worlds. The stagecoach thundered across the dry Texas plains, its wheels clattering over jagged rock and dust. Inside, Willa gripped a worn leather satchel to her chest, her knuckles white. Every jolt of the wagon reminded her how far she'd traveled from the comfort of her old life and how much farther she still had to go. Apache territory. Ahead. Miss the driver, Roy Maddox called over his shoulder, his tone as casual as if he were talking about a change in the weather. Won't be long now. Willa's throat tightened. She smoothed the creases of her faded blue dress, a piece of London fashion, now hopelessly out of place in this vast, merciless land. The late sun hung low, turning the grass into a sea of gold that waved with each gust of wind. Just 3 months ago, she'd been the cherished daughter of Elias Hart, a respected merchant. But his sudden death and crushing debts had stripped her of everything. Desperate, she had answered an advertisement for brides on the frontier, hoping for a rancher or tradesman. Instead, her passage had been paid by Kael Redhawk, an Apache warrior, known for walking between two worlds, the native tribes and the settlers who feared them. I won't be treated like property, she whispered under her breath, a promise she'd repeated like a prayer across the ocean. I'll honor the deal, but I'll never belong to him. The coach began to slow as they neared a lonely trading post, wood and stone, weathered by the desert wind. 2 flags flew overhead, the stars and stripes, and another banner. Willa didn't recognize, perhaps a sign of peace between settlers and the tribes. When the wheels ground to a stop, she stayed seated, frozen in place, until Roy Maddox swung the door open and extended a calloused hand. End of the line for you, miss. Your escort's waiting. Taking a steadying breath, Willa placed her gloved hand in his and stepped into the blazing Texas heat. The air felt alive, heavy with dust and sunlight. As her eyes adjusted, she saw him standing in the shade of the porch, still and silent as a carved statue. Kael Redhawk was not what she had imagined. He stood taller than any man she'd ever met, his strength unmistakable even beneath a strange mix of Apache leather and frontier cloth. His chest was broad, his shoulders like stone, his arms lined with the kind of muscle earned from years of survival, not vanity. Long black hair, bound in 2 braids, fell against his chest, each one strung with beads and a single eagle feather. Around his neck hung talismans of bone and carved stone. But it was his face, sharp, angular, and shadowed by dark eyes that struck her hardest. One look, and her pulse stumbled. Roy tossed her trunk down beside her. "Good luck to you, miss," he muttered, before climbing back onto the stagecoach. Moments later, the wheels rolled away, leaving Willa standing alone, small, out of place, and far from everything she'd ever known. She straightened her spine. She would not appear weak. Kael moved toward her with the silent grace of a predator. Up close, his presence was overwhelming his gaze, cool, unreadable. "You are Willa," he said at last, his voice deep and even, touched by the faint rhythm of another tongue. "Willa Hart," she replied, forcing her voice to remain steady. "And you are Kael Redhawk." He nodded once, his eyes sweeping over her, not with lust, but with measured scrutiny, as though judging her strength, her resolve. Willa's cheeks flushed with indignation. "I'm not what you expected, am I?" she said, her tone edged with defiance. Kael's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "No," he answered simply. Then, after a pause, "You are small." Her chin lifted. "What I lack in size I make up for in determination. I've crossed an ocean to fulfill my part of this agreement. I expect to be treated with respect." Kael's eyes narrowed slightly, though she couldn't tell if it was amusement or challenge. Without another word, he lifted her heavy trunk as if it weighed nothing and gestured toward a golden palomino tethered nearby. "We ride to my home," he said. "It is half a day's journey." Willa stared at the horse in alarm. "I've never ridden before," she admitted. "In London, we used carriages." Kael regarded her quietly for a moment, then began fastening her trunk to the saddle. "Then you will learn," he said simply, "as you must learn many things to survive here." Before she could protest, he placed his strong hands at her waist and lifted her onto the horse with effortless strength. His touch was firm but not unkind. The warmth of his palms burned through the fabric of her dress. "Hold the mane," he instructed, showing her with a brief tug. "Like this?" she asked, gripping the coarse hair with trembling fingers. Kael nodded, then mounted behind her in one smooth motion. His arms came around her as he took the reins, his chest brushing her back, solid and warm. "I will not let you fall," he murmured near her ear, his breath low and steady. Low and... The words sent a shiver down her spine. As the horse began to move, Willa had no choice but to lean back against him, her heart caught between fear and something far more dangerous. Their journey into the wild had begun. Willa Hart stared nervously at the horse before her. I've never ridden before," she admitted softly. "In London, we used carriages." Kael Redhawk studied her in silence, his dark gaze calm yet unyielding. Without a word, he began fastening her trunk to the back of the saddle. "Then you'll learn," he said simply, his voice low and sure. "Out here, survival teaches faster than comfort ever will." Before she could speak again, Kael stepped closer and with effortless strength lifted her by the waist onto the palomino's back. Willa gasped, the movement swift, the contact brief yet startlingly intimate. His hands were strong, but gentle, the warmth of his palms seeping through the thin fabric of her dress. "Hold the mane," he instructed, tugging lightly at the golden strands. "Like this?" she asked, her voice trembling, as her fingers gripped the coarse hair. Kael gave a single nod, then mounted behind her in one fluid motion. She stiffened as his arms came around to take the reins, his broad chest pressing against her back, his thighs steadying hers. "I won't let you fall," he murmured, close to her ear, his breath brushing her skin like heat from a nearby fire. Willa nodded, her pulse racing as the horse began to move. The rhythm of its steps forced her to lean back against him, his solid frame both intimidating and strangely reassuring. They rode in silence, the trading post fading behind them, the vast wilderness swallowing everything civilized in its path. Cottonwoods scattered across the land, their leaves whispering in the dry wind. After a long stretch, curiosity overcame her fear. "Why did you send for a bride?" she asked quietly. "Surely there are women among your own people." Kael rode on for a moment before answering, his tone steady, revealing nothing. "I walk between two worlds," he said. "The settlers trust me because I understand their ways. My people follow me because I've proven my strength. But to truly bridge those worlds..." He paused, glancing toward the horizon, I needed a wife who knows the white man's customs, so I'm just a convenience, Willa replied, bitterness slipping through her composure. Kael's grip on the reins tightened, his arms firming slightly around her as the horse stepped over rocky ground. You are what you choose to be, he said quietly. As am I. The sun had begun its slow descent when they reached the top of a small ridge. Willa gasped. Below lay a hidden valley, a silver creek, winding through the grass smoke, curling gently from a lodge that blended wood and hide, part Apache dwelling, part frontier cabin. My home, Kael said, his voice softening with quiet pride. Our home now. As they approached, two figures stepped out to meet them, an older woman with silver-streaked braids and a boy of about 12. This is Tala Sunwhisper, Kael said, nodding toward the woman. My mother's sister. And this is Oren Snowbud, my brother's son. My brother walks with the ancestors now. Willa inclined her head. It's an honor to meet you both. Tala's dark eyes studied her closely as she circled, murmuring something in Apache. Kael translated with a trace of amusement. She says you're too delicate for this land, that your hands have never known work. Then tell her, Willa replied, meeting Tala's gaze, that I'm stronger than I look, and willing to learn. When Kael translated, Tala's stern face softened. She reached out, touching Willa's pale hair with a weathered hand, speaking again in her native tongue. She says your hair is like sunlight, Kael said with a faint smile, that perhaps you'll bring light into our home. The unexpected kindness warmed Willa's heart. As the evening deepened, Tala guided her inside while Kael and Oren tended to the horses. The interior mixed two worlds, woven blankets and animal hides, beside a rough-hewn table and stone hearth. The air smelled of wood smoke and earth. Tala motioned toward a curtained area at the back. Willa understood at once that was where she and Kael would sleep. The realization struck her like a thunderclap. By nightfall, she would share a bed with a man she barely knew, a warrior whose very presence unsettled her in ways she couldn't name. After supper, Tala and Oren retired, leaving her alone with Kael. The fire burned low, its glow flickering across his strong features. His gaze was steady, unreadable, and yet something in it made her pulse tremble. You should rest, Kael Redhawk said quietly, his voice carrying the steady calm of a man used to command. Tomorrow we'll test you. Willa Hart swallowed hard, her fingers twisting together in her lap. There's something I need you to understand, she began, forcing herself to meet his gaze. This arrangement between us, I agreed to it because I had no choice. I'll be your wife in name. I'll learn your ways. I'll try to bridge these worlds of yours, but... Her words faltered as color rose to her cheeks. I need time. Before I can... Kael rose to his feet, his expression unreadable. He moved toward her with slow, deliberate steps until he stood close enough for her to feel the warmth radiating from his body. Willa's pulse quickened. When he extended his hand, she hesitated only a moment before placing hers in it. Come, he said simply. He led her to the sleeping area where a bed of soft furs and woven blankets waited, far more welcoming than she expected. Kael released her hand and stepped to the far side of the room. Without a word, he began to remove his shirt. Willa turned sharply away, her breath catching at the glimpse of his broad, scarred chest. Please, she whispered, her voice trembling. I'm not ready. For a long moment, silence filled the air. Then Kael spoke again, his tone low, steady, and unexpectedly gentle. The nights are cold here. We'll share warmth, nothing more, he said. Then, after a pause, not until you're ready. When she dared to glance back, he was already lying on one side of the bed, leaving space for her. The firelight flickered across his bare shoulders, revealing the history etched into his skin, scars of battle strength and survival. With shaking hands, Willa removed only her outer dress, keeping her chemise and corset tightly laced. She slipped beneath the covers, lying as far from him as the small bed allowed. "Sleep, little sun hare," Kael murmured, using Tala Sun Whisper's earlier words. "You are safe here." In the dim light of the dying fire, tears welled in Willa's eyes. She was alone in a foreign land, bound to a man she barely knew, surrounded by people she couldn't understand. And yet in his quiet respect, in that promise of safety, there was something fragile, but real hope. Sleep finally claimed her, unaware that Kael lay awake beside her, watching the faint rise and fall of her breath. Her strength intrigued him, this woman from across the ocean, brave enough to step into his world. Their story had only just begun. Dawn broke, with fierce brilliance over the plains. Golden light spilled through the cracks in the lodge walls, warming the packed earth floor. Willa stirred momentarily, lost between dreams and memory. Then it all returned, the journey, the vow, the man. The space beside her was empty, though the furs still held the shape of Kael's body. Touching the spot, she found it cold. He'd been gone for hours. She dressed quickly, pinning her golden hair into a simple knot and fastening it with her mother's pearl hairpin, the last piece of her old life. When she stepped into the main room, Tala Sun Whisper was crouched beside the fire, stirring something thick and steaming in a clay pot. The older woman looked up briefly, then motioned toward a bowl. Willa sat down, murmuring, "Thank you," even though she knew the woman couldn't understand. The porridge was earthy and unfamiliar, flavored with herbs she couldn't name, but it was good. She nodded her appreciation. Tala's stern face softened, if only slightly. Where Willa began, then mimed drawing a bow. Tala understood at once and pointed toward the open doorway. Hunting her gesture, said. Just then, Orin Snowbud burst in his small feet, kicking up dust, his eyes bright with excitement. He spoke rapidly to his great-aunt, waving his hands. Tala scolded him lightly, then motioned toward Willa. The boy hesitated, curiosity replacing his grin. Willa smiled gently. "Hello, Orin." He blinked, then smiled back, stepping closer. He pointed to her hair, then to himself, saying something softly. "He asks if he may touch your hair," came Kael's deep voice from the doorway. Willa turned, startled to find him standing there, framed in sunlight. His dark hair glistened, and a string of game birds hung from one hand. He looked every bit the warrior she had imagined, powerful, composed, and quietly dangerous. "Of course," Willa said, bending to Orin's height. The boy reached out, brushing her golden strands with wonder in his eyes. He said something to Kael, who smiled faintly. The world outside their walls was vast and untamed, but in that small moment, as laughter flickered between them, something tender began to take root. A rare smile broke across Kael Redhawk's usually stoic face. "He says your hair feels like sunlight." Willa Hart felt warmth stir in her chest at the boy's innocent wonder. "Then tell him I think his hair is beautiful, too dark and strong like a raven's wing." When Kael translated, Orin Snowbud straightened proudly, puffing out his small chest. He tugged gently at Willa's hand, motioning toward the door, speaking quickly in Apache. "He wants to show you the horses," Kael explained, handing the game birds to Tala Sun Whisper. "But first there is work to be done. You'll need to learn the ways of this home." The morning passed in a blur of new tasks. Under Tala's sharp but patient instruction, Willa helped pluck and prepare the birds' grind corn and tend the fire. Her soft hands soon burned and reddened, though she bit back any sign of weakness. By midday, she was struggling at the stone mortar when she sensed Kael watching her from the doorway. His dark eyes followed every movement, and the intensity of his gaze made her heart race. "Your hands bleed," he said simply, stepping closer. Startled, Willa glanced down to see small cuts across her palms. "It's nothing," she murmured, embarrassed by her clumsy efforts. Without another word, Kael knelt beside her. His large, roughened hands enveloped hers, their difference startling her pale fingers fragile against his weathered skin. He took a small pouch from his belt and dabbed a salve across the cuts with remarkable care. "The first days are hardest," he said quietly. "Your hands will grow strong." Willa couldn't look away. His face was so close, the firm line of his jaw, the faint furrow of focus between his brows. His touch carried no dominance, only quiet patience. "Why me?" she asked suddenly, her voice softer than she intended. "You could have chosen anyone. Why send for a stranger across the ocean?" Kael's hands stilled. He met her gaze, something unreadable glinting in his eyes. "The Apache women look at me and see what I am not. The white women see only what they fear." "What do they see?" she whispered. "The one who walks between," he said. "My father was Apache, a warrior. My mother was white, taken as a child. She stayed because she chose him, but after peace came her own family, called her back. She refused, and so I was left belonging nowhere." Understanding dawned slowly. Neither world had fully claimed him. "I wanted a wife who'd come without those old hatreds," he continued quietly. "Someone who might see me as I am, not as the world names me." The honesty in his words struck something deep within her. She had expected distance, perhaps cruelty, but not this quiet truth. "I see you, Kael," she said softly. Something flickered in his expression, a rare, unguarded warmth. But before he could reply, Oren burst into the room, chattering with excitement. Kael stood swiftly answering in Apache with a faint note of reproach. When he turned back, his calm mask had returned. "Oren grows impatient to show you the horses," he said. "Come, you've done enough for today." Outside, the midday sun burned high over the valley. Oren ran ahead toward the corral, where several sleek horses grazed, calling their names proudly, as Kael translated. "The Apache are the finest horsemen on these plains," Kael said, pride in his voice. "Our children learn to ride before they can walk." Willa smiled faintly. "Then I'm terribly behind schedule." "You'll learn," he replied matter-of-factly. "You must if you mean to survive here." The words sobered her. She was far from home, dependent on a man she barely knew in a land both harsh and magnificent. As if sensing her unease, Kael added quietly, "I'll teach you myself." Before she could answer, a distant sound cut through the stillness, the rhythmic thunder of approaching hooves. Kael stiffened. In an instant, his posture changed, alert and ready. Inside, he ordered his voice low but firm. Willa turned to see 3 riders cresting the ridge, white settlers, by the look of their clothes and the way they carried their rifles. Dust swirled around their horses as Kael stepped forward, placing himself between her and the danger that rode toward them. "Who are they, Willa?" Hart asked, her voice sharp with fear at the sudden tension in Kael Redhawk's stance. "Men from the settlement," he said grimly, his eyes narrowing as his hand dropped to the knife at his belt. "They don't come to trade. Go inside now. Take Oren with you." Something in his tone, low, commanding, final, allowed no argument. Willa grabbed Oren Snowbud's small hand and pulled him toward the doorway. Just before stepping inside, she looked back. Kael stood in the open, tall and unmoving, the wind whipping through his braids as 3 riders drew near. From the narrow gap in the wall, Willa watched the men dismount. Their leader, a thick, bearded man with the swagger of arrogance, walked forward, wearing a false grin that didn't reach his cold, pale eyes. "Kael Redhawk," he called. "Heard tell you took yourself a white wife. Thought we'd ride over and see if she needs rescuing." Kael's reply was too quiet to hear, but his posture didn't shift an inch. The bearded man laughed a hard, humorless sound. "Now don't get sore. We're just being friendly. It ain't natural is all. A white woman with red-skin blood close by, especially one tied to a half-blood like you." His companions snickered, their laughter sharp as knives. Behind Willa, Tala Sunwhisper appeared suddenly, gripping her arm with surprising strength. "They want to see you," she said, in broken but clear English, the first words Willa had heard from her. "They say prove you are here of your own will." "They think he forced me," Willa whispered, stunned. Tala's gaze was steady, unflinching. "They look for reason to hurt him. You choose hide here or stand beside husband. It wasn't a real choice." Willa straightened her back, her heart hammering, and moved toward the door. Tala didn't stop her. Instead, a faint glimmer of respect passed through her dark eyes. The air outside was charged when Willa stepped into the sunlight. All eyes turned to her. Kael's dark with worry and protectiveness, the settlers filled with mockery and surprise. "Gentlemen," she said, drawing on every ounce of her English composure. "My name is Willa Hart, formerly of London. I am here of my own choosing as Mr. Redhawk's wife." The bearded man, Hank Dobbs, let his gaze roam over her, smirking. "London, huh? That's a long way to travel just to marry a savage." Kael tensed his muscles, coiling hand inching toward his knife. Without thinking, Willa placed a trembling hand on his arm. Beneath her fingers, his strength felt like living fire. "I married a man, sir," she said firmly. "Not a label. And I'd appreciate it if you respected both my husband and my choice." Hank's smile vanished. "Pretty speech," he sneered. "But I've seen what happens to white women living among Indians. You'll be crying for rescue before winter." Kael's voice cut through the air like a blade. "My wife has spoken. Your concern is noted. Now leave our land." For a tense moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Hank's hand hovered near his gun. His men shifted in their saddles. Then, with a contemptuous laugh, he swung back onto his horse. "Your choice, lady," he said over his shoulder. "When you change your mind, and you will Fort Richardson's a day's ride east." As the riders disappeared into the shimmering horizon, Willa realized she was shaking. The weight of what had just happened settled heavily over her. This was no longer just a strange new home. It was a battleground of pride and survival. Kael's voice, low and almost tender, broke the silence. "Thank you," he said. She looked up, surprised. "For what?" "For standing with me," he replied. "Few would have done so." The honesty in his tone struck something deep inside her. The Texas sun burned overhead, and in that fierce light, Willa felt something shift, an invisible bond forming between them. That evening, as they sat by the fire, sharing a quiet meal, she found herself studying his face in the flickering glow. What once seemed hard and foreign now looked different, steadfast-wise, even gentle beneath the firelight. Their eyes met across the flames. No words were spoken, but something passed between them, a fragile understanding, a beginning neither had expected. Later, when she lay beside him, beneath the same furs, the fear she once felt was gone, replaced by a nervous anticipation she didn't yet dare name. Kael's deep voice came softly through the dark. "Sleep well, Willa Hart. And for the first time since she'd arrived in this wild land, she closed her eyes and believed she might. Willa Hart. Kael Redhawk murmured, speaking her full name for the first time. "And you, Kael?" she replied softly, her pulse quickening when his hand brushed lightly against hers in the dark. The touch lasted only a heartbeat, but it lingered like fire beneath her skin long after. That night, as the wind sighed over the plains, Willa lay awake, staring into the shadows. She could not make sense of the strange turns her life had taken, or of the even stranger warmth blooming for the Apache warrior, who for now was her husband only in name. Weeks slipped by beneath the Texas sun. One sunrise melted into another, and with each passing day, Willa grew more attuned to the rhythm of life in Kael's homestead. Her hands, once soft and pale, now bore small scars and calluses, proof of honest work. Her skin had darkened beneath the relentless heat, her shoulders had squared, her steps had grown sure. But nothing had changed more than her heart. Kael's rare smiles, his quiet patience, the way his strength seemed born from the earth itself, these things stirred something deep within her. At night they lay side by side, beneath the same firs, close enough to feel each other's breath, yet untouched. The silence between them grew heavier by the day, alive with words neither dared to speak. Each morning she caught herself watching him, how his muscles moved with the grace of a wild creature, how gently he taught Orin Snowbud the skills of their people. On the 15th day, Kael approached as she hung the washing in the sun. "Today you learn to ride," he said, his deep voice leaving no room for refusal. Her stomach fluttered, but she nodded. "I'm ready." At the corral, he had already saddled the gentle bay mare she had admired her first day. Even standing close to him filled her with an uneasy heat she didn't understand. "The horse feels your fear," Kael said, stepping beside her. "Breathe deep. Show her your strength." She drew a steady breath, forcing calm into her limbs. The mare shifted beneath her, but remained still. "Good," Kael murmured his approval, warm as sunlight. "Now hold the reins like this." He reached up, adjusting her grip. His fingers lingered a heartbeat too long against hers. For the next hour, his voice guided her, low, steady, reassuring, as she circled the corral again and again. By midday, she rode with surprising confidence. When Orin cheered her from the fence, Kael's lips curved into a faint, proud smile. "You learn quickly," he said, as he helped her dismount, his hands sliding slowly from her waist. "Tomorrow, we ride beyond the corral." That night, a wild thunderstorm swept across the plains. The wind shrieked through the cracks of the dwelling rain, slashed the walls, and the sky roared with fury. When lightning cracked overhead, Willa flinched. "You fear the storm?" Kael's voice was a low rumble in the dark. "No," she whispered. "I find it beautiful, untamed. Powerful." A flash illuminated his face, surprised, thoughtful. "The Apache believe thunder beings lend their strength to those who respect their power," he said quietly. Another crash rolled through the night. Without thinking, Willa reached out and found his arm. She meant to pull back immediately, but his large hand covered hers, holding it there. "I will protect you," he said softly, "from all storms." Something in his tone made her breath tremble. Slowly she moved closer, her body finding warmth beside his. After a moment, Kael's arm settled around her shoulders, pulling her gently against his chest. They did not speak again, nor move beyond that simple closeness, but in the quiet between thunderclaps, something fragile took root. Trust. By dawn, the storm had passed. The air was clear and sharp, the land washed clean. True to his word, Kael saddled the horses and led her beyond the corral across endless rolling plains that shimmered beneath the morning light. Willa rode beside him, growing bolder with every mile. Her laughter, free and unguarded, rose above the wind. When they stopped beside a stream to rest, she sat beside him on a sun-warmed rock. "Your land is beautiful," she said, watching a hawk glide above. "It's nothing like England, but it has a beauty all its own." Kael was silent for a long moment. "It is changing," he said at last. "More white settlers each season. Fewer buffalo. The old ways are fading." The quiet sorrow in his voice cut through her heart like a blade. She looked at him then, not as a stranger, not as her captor, but as a man standing between two worlds, fighting not to lose either. And for the first time, she understood what it meant when he had said, "I walk between." "Is that why you built your home between two worlds?" Willa Hart asked softly. "To hold on to what you can to survive." Kael Redhawk corrected his voice low, but not bitter. "And maybe to build something new from what's left of the old." He turned to her, then eyes dark and steady. "Something that can endure what's coming." Willa felt the gravity of his words sink into her chest. She knew he wasn't just talking about the land or the walls they lived within, but about a life balanced between two worlds and the fragile future he was trying to carve out of both. And now she was part of that vision. They rode back toward the homestead beneath the fading orange of the setting sun. Silence stretched between them, not cold but thoughtful. Yet as they drew near, Willa saw Kael suddenly tense. His hand went instinctively to the knife at his belt. 3 horses were tied outside the cabin, none of them familiar. One bore the U.S. Cavalry brand. "Stay behind me," Kael ordered, his tone sharp as flint. He dismounted in one smooth motion and strode toward the door. Willa's pulse pounded as she followed close behind. Inside Tala, Sunwhisper and Orin Snowbud sat rigid by the fire, facing 3 visitors, 2 uniformed soldiers and a civilian in a black coat, his posture slick with confidence. "There he is," the civilian said, rising to his feet with an oily smile. "The famous Kael Redhawk, scout trader, and now husband to a white woman." His eyes slid to Willa, assessing her like she was something displayed at market misses. "Redhawk, I presume? Or do you prefer your Christian name, Willa Hart Redhawk?" she said coolly. "And you are Vance Hollow," he replied smoothly, tipping his hat. "Indian Affairs Bureau." His grin didn't touch his eyes. "I come with an offer for your husband." Kael stood motionless, but Willa felt the tension radiate from him. "What kind of offer? The government recognizes your unique position," Vance said, spreading his hands in mock generosity. "A man who understands both sides. We need men like you to help the Apache move peacefully onto reservations." "Reservations," Kael repeated, his voice flat, the word tasting like dust. "Progress is inevitable," Vance continued, pacing slowly. "But for you and your family, there could be comfort, a proper home, schooling for the boy, civilized company for your wife." His gaze swept over the simple earthen walls. Better than this, surely. Willa's temper flared. "Hollow," she said sharply. "We're perfectly content with our home, primitive or not." Vance blinked, surprised by her firmness. "Mrs. Redhawk, with all due respect, surely a woman of your upbringing would prefer a woman of my upbringing," she interrupted. "Values, loyalty, honor, and freedom above comfort. And I've found all 3 here." Kael's hand brushed hers, his fingers twining with her own, a silent show of unity. Vance's smile turned brittle. "The offer isn't optional," he said, his tone dropping its politeness. "The Apache are being moved. Those who resist will be dealt with. Firmly. But you, Kael, you could make it easier. For them. For your mother's people. The room went deathly quiet. The only sound was the fire's low crackle. Finally, Kael's voice broke the silence, steady, strong. My answer is no. I will not help you cage my people. Vance sighed theatrically. I expected more sense from you. He turned to the soldiers. You have 1 month. After that, this land will be cleared one way or another. The threat hung heavy in the air long after they rode away, leaving only smoke silence and the echo of what was coming. That night, after Tala and Orin had gone to bed, Willa found Kael standing outside, staring at the endless spread of stars. What will you do? She asked quietly. There's no good choice, he said. His voice carried the weariness of a man torn in two. If I accept, I betray who I am. If I refuse, his jaw tightened. I risk everything this home Orin's future. He paused, eyes still on the horizon. Your safety. Willa stepped closer, reaching for his hand. Whatever you decide, I stand with you, she said. Not because I must, but because I choose to. He turned his dark eyes, searching her face. Why? Her answer came barely above a whisper. Because in you, I've found something I never expected. A man of honor, of courage of heart. She hesitated, breath trembling. A man I've come to love. The night around them seemed to hold its breath. Then Kael's hands rose to cradle her face, rough palms trembling slightly against her skin. His touch was gentle, reverent, like he feared she might vanish if he held her too tightly. For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the desert wind moved whispering through the darkness as the stars burned bright above them. From the moment you stood beside me against the settlers, Kael Redhawk said, his deep voice rough with emotion. I've been yours, not as a master or an owner, but as a man who's finally found his match. When his lips met Willa Hart's, it felt as though the stars themselves had fallen to earth. The kiss grew deeper, the years of loneliness and quiet ache dissolving in the heat of their embrace. His powerful arms lifted her effortlessly, carrying her inside to the furs they had once shared so chastely until now. In the soft glow of the dying fire, they came together not as strangers bound by duty, but as two souls united by choice and longing. Kael's hands and lips moved over her with reverent passion, as if memorizing every curve and breath. Willa trembled beneath his touch, tracing the scars that marked his life's battles, learning how to return the fire he awakened in her. Their joining was more than desire. It was a promise. A bridge between two worlds forged by love instead of blood or war. A vow that something new, something sacred could rise from what history had broken. Afterward, lying in Kael's arms, Willa drew lazy circles across his chest. We'll find a way, she whispered. Together. And they did. Over the following weeks, they worked side by side. Willa's education and pen joined with Kael's wisdom of the land. Together, they wrote letters to sympathetic officials, to men of conscience back east, and secured the support of Captain Jed Rourke at Fort Richardson. Piece by piece, they built a legal claim to their homestead strong enough that even the Indian Affairs Bureau couldn't easily tear it down. When Vance Hollow returned, a month later expecting submission, he found defiance. No desperate half-breed and frightened wife, but a united family armed with documents, allies, and dignity. This isn't over. Hollow warned, his words like venom. The reservations are coming. Perhaps Kael answered evenly. But change has many faces. We'll meet it on our own terms. That night, as the first chill of autumn swept across the plains, they stood outside their home, watching the sunset blaze red and gold. "I got a letter from London today," Willa said softly, leaning into his warmth. "My cousin writes that society is scandalized by my savage marriage. They think I must be miserable." Kael's deep chuckle rumbled against her back. "And are you, little son?" She turned in his arms, lifting her face to his. "I've never been happier," she whispered, her lips brushing his. "What began as necessity," she said, "has become my greatest joy." "And mine," he replied, holding her close as night gathered around them. The stars came out bright, unending, eternal. Willa looked up at them and thought of her journey, the ocean she had crossed, the life she had left behind. Once she had sought survival. Now she had found something far greater: love, fierce and defiant, strong enough to outlast the frontier itself. Whatever the future brought, the settlers' greed, the government's reach, or the prejudice of both their worlds, they would face it side by side. Neither fully of one world nor the other, but something new, something wholly their own. In Kael Redhawk's arms beneath the vast Texas sky, Willa Hart had not only found a home, she had found her destiny. A love written not in London's parlors, but across the wild, free heart of the American frontier. And their story was only just beginning.